friend and colleague, Tracy Warren, to Quotes from Quarantine, which is a series of short conversations talking to amazing warriors in this space of female health, sexual health, and women's health, and really just to understand business is challenging under the best of circumstances. This category has its own idiosyncrasies, and then you add this new world that we're all operating in. So the focus really is to get some insights from people who are making it happen. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your multiple roles as an investor and an entrepreneur, and how you're spending your time lately.
Yeah, so it is a challenging time. The only benefit is everybody's in it, so at least there's no us versus them in this. So for us, it's all about thinking about runway. How can you keep your teams together? How can you keep them motivated? Certainly if you're in the situation where you're fundraising, life is really difficult right now. So I think for us, it's really about being there to listen, but also to provide advice. And then for our own team, just trying to keep everybody motivated and on task, and, reminding that it will end, it will pass. But the best thing you can do is continue to show progress in a time like this, because people are distracted.
And in your operating role, you're working on a very important and challenging problem. Talk about the population that you're focused on and the services that you're providing for what's already a vulnerable population.
Yeah, and so fortunately, we're focused on preterm infants. So these are kids that are spending a significant amount of time in the neonatal ICU. So, the good news is we're a software company. So from a product development perspective, things can be done remotely. The difficulty is obviously that COVID-19 has had an impact on hospitals at large, and at both the burden, the noise, and the concern about everything. Our NICUs are business as usual. Babies are still there and they need the care, and they're not being dragged into other sort of ICU challenges. But I can't imagine being a new parent of a vulnerable baby during a time like this. It must be even more so terrifying. So our hearts go out to our nurses and our doctors and all the people caring for these babies, and certainly for the families.
And based on what you're hearing, I know for people giving birth, there are new policies in place in terms of whether you can bring a partner or someone with you. Have you heard anything about changing policies in terms of parents' ability to visit with their infants who are in the NICU?
Absolutely, and there's a lot of sensitivity around what's really important to our babies early on is skin-to-skin contact when it's possible, and it's both from their microbiome development and their exposure to mom and to family. There are a lot of restrictions in place on number of visitors, frequency of touch, things that are really, really important to our babies as they start to get their sensory awareness. But for their safety, it's all being very heavily, carefully regulated. So again, I think it's a really tough time as you're struggling to connect with your baby, but you're afraid to do anything, obviously, to harm him or her. So.
It's hard to imagine what that emotional feeling is like when you're worried about bonding with your baby, the safety and health of your baby. You have to be, maybe you have other children in the home or other people you're caring for, so you need to worry about your own exposure. It's, a huge emotional burden, and I'm sure there are a number of other kinds of burdens that it is as well. What are you doing in this environment? You talked about making sure your teams are focused and on task, and again, I'm continually amazed at, in the time, that many, many years that I've been in the space, the quality, the caliber, the strength, and the positivity of people in this space. And so I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time. You're working on serious business in serious times. What are you doing personally to keep your spirits up and to keep your own focus? I know you're worried about your team, but you're the leader of the team. Yeah. So you need to be working to make sure you can keep it together as well. What are some of the things you're doing?
So I don't know if other, women my age, I will say, sleep was always sort of an afterthought. You never really made time. You left work and you were running the kids from this to that, and you really never took time for yourself. And if there is a benefit to sort of the COVID-19 situation, is it forces you to use your time because you don't have a lot of other options, right? So getting outside more, sleeping better, like all of this sort of self-help stuff that you probably should do anyway. It's probably been one of the few benefits of the quarantine. But the other thing for me is just, using video to see friends, to see, people that you obviously can't physically interact with, but faces, smiles, and, having people feel that you can at least still connect. And so thankfully, I mean, if you remember video technology of old, we never could have done this with latencies and in and out sound quality. So, just making sure you try to stay as normal as you can, but don't forget the human aspect of just talking to friends and sharing stories and, laughing a little.
I keep hearing stories from people that I'm speaking to as part of this series or just in general. I spoke to a woman yesterday who spent 6 hours on a phone call with friends who live in a totally another part of the world, friends she's had since 6th grade. And I'm thinking, wow, that's really leaning in. I don't know the last time I had a 6-hour conversation with a friend, but good for you. And I do think there's this attitude that you expressed about making lemonade out of lemons. So one of the things I've focused on is I don't mind having a few weeks where I don't have to get on a plane or in a car or juggle.
Right.
It's a different kind of juggling I'm finding when you're in your home all the time with your family. I have adult kids, so one's working on schoolwork, one's working at her full-time job, my husband's working, so we're doing some space management and figuring out how to coexist in a way that we haven't had to since they haven't lived at home for the past couple of years. I know you and I also share that we have at least one child who are, I have two, and I know you have at least one who is a competitive athlete. How is that all faring? I know that you spend a lot of time on planes and trains getting her to these competitions, which have all been canceled. And seasons as usual are a thing of the past.
Yeah, well, and so it's twofold. So my daughter is a senior in high school, so I think that has probably been the biggest heartbreak for her is prom and graduation and all this sort of uncertainty about some very kind of life, very important events in life that are now either on hold or perhaps canceled. So that's probably been emotionally the toughest. But kids staying active, if your kid's in a sports program, even if it's, local YMCA, at least they're out running around and there's a coach that you can share responsibility with for an hour or two that will make them exercise. So the biggest thing for me is forcing them to do it when I'm not a coach. I think,
well, now you are. Now you're
true,
a
right? Now I am, and
I'm
right. So I have a 15-year-old son who's a soccer player, and so arguing with him that he needs to run and maintain his cardio and, and it's like, oh, Mom. So thankfully his coach has started sending out for the boys, like, here's some video things, tape yourself, I want to see it. And so now I don't have to be the bad guy anymore because I think, you're trying to push schoolwork, all of a sudden now you're teacher and coach and all these other things and and you're physically around them all the time. It's very interesting. I have 3 teenagers, so it's got its challenges.
Oh, I'm sure. It probably has its challenges when you're not trapped in the house and running your businesses and doing all those other things.
Right.
One of the themes that I've also seen is there's just a general positivity. I don't know if it's the people that I'm privileged to know or people who choose to be in femtech or sex tech or women's health or infant health, that they come in with a predisposition, but I'm also finding it quite uplifting just hearing how people are muscling through. And, there's a lot of day-to-day stuff, and I'm constantly thinking about the people on the front lines. We can all complain the walls feel like they're caving in, which is very different than if you have someone in your family or you yourself are on the front lines as a healthcare worker, as an essential employee, who literally you're putting your life at risk every day, and then you have to come back to your family. And I think the perspective, it's easier the older you get to have that perspective about, health trumps everything else, but that's not a perspective that everybody shares. And I think kids are missing so many sort of life cycle experiences, whether it's college graduation or prom or high school graduation or whatever it is. And For me, I would say the one positive of that is life never goes as you planned. And so learning the skills to figure out how to be resilient in disappointment and, true hardship, I think are again, potential positive upsides of the situation that we find ourselves in.
Well, and I'm glad you're spreading that message, Rachel, because I do think, look, we all kind of have to suck it up and get through it. But I think women in our field are warriors trying to create this category and accomplish things. And so I would say adversity or hardship or things not going the way you planned is sort of par for the course. Right. So I'm not surprised that your network, given how vast it is, that you're finding people are just sort of rolling up their sleeves and doing it different, but getting it done. I think the healthcare workers, this is the thing that for me, you just wish you could do something. From a paralyzing perspective, reading about New York and the Navy boat coming in as a hospital and turning Central Park into I lived in New York for 10 years. I went to school there. I can't imagine the burden on the people spending 12, 24-hour shifts caring for this and just feeling like there's no end in sight. And if there's anything out there that the news today called them heroes and warriors, and you want to talk about the real amazing people in this world we should be thankful for, it is the healthcare workers. I can't imagine what they're going through.
I 100% agree. And I do feel that in small ways every day, people are trying to show their appreciation. I don't think we can fathom if you're not on the front lines of a COVID-19 hospital. I was listening to an interview last night where a physician is in a hospital with 1,200 beds where they normally do everything from treating a cold to doing transplants to surgery. And now they are totally a COVID-19 hospital, and how that just changes. So I agree with you, this gratitude, if you are lucky enough to be healthy, gratitude to be healthy, gratitude for whoever in your family and your orbit is healthy, but just such amazing appreciation for people whose jobs were hard to begin with. It wasn't like these nurses and doctors were, staying at home eating bonbons before this, but, their game really has to be elevated. Any last tips for what you're doing to make sure this looks like it's going to be a long haul? Every day you listen to the news, the predictions are different. What are some of the tools and tricks you and Tam, your business partner, are using or sharing to make sure that we're at the other side of this, you still have the same energy and drive, and the businesses that you're in still have a chance to continue to be successful?
Yeah, I think that the toughest thing is to remember why you're doing this, right? So for us, it's both our patients and their families, but it's also the people we work with. So we're doing one-on-ones with our staff. So it's nice to just hop on the phone, have no agenda. On Friday, we did our first happy hour, our virtual happy hour for you, whether you bring tea or coffee or, an adult beverage, just letting everybody get on and, icebreaker games, just things to remember that it's about the people and why we do this. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing, is getting people to stay resilient when it feels so disconnected.
Well, I love what you said, and I think that's a great place to close. It's about the people and why you do this. So wishing you the continued unbelievable drive and energy that you have, and I hope to see you soon, and I hope your kids are exercising and doing all the things, and that you are managing now your 30 different roles that you have. I think last time I saw you, maybe there were only 15, but they continue to grow exponentially. Be well, stay safe, and I'll see you in a few weeks or months, I hope, in person.
Hope so. All right. Great to see you, Rachel. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Tracy. Have a great day.